Ethnic Media Services in partnership with the California Student Aid Commission, CSAC. I'm Sandy Close, EMS Director, and today's moderator. Today's briefing highlights the recent extension of the state financial aid priority deadline to April 2nd, 2025. This extension provides students and families with additional time to complete their financial aid applications. And it was prompted in part by delays caused by the rollout of the Better FAFSA, F-A-F-S-A. This decision comes also as a response to data showing a 25% decrease in financial aid applications from California high school seniors compared to previous years. That's really a dramatic decline, 25%. Our discussion today will focus on how California is working to ensure that all students, especially those from underrepresented communities, have equal access and equitable access to financial aid opportunities that make higher education more affordable. We'll also highlight the partnerships CSAC has forged with institutions like the University of California system and California community colleges to streamline this application process and support student success at every level. We have gathered a distinguished panel of experts who will provide valuable insights and answers to your questions. And we encourage reporters to enter questions in the chat box, which our speakers will address in addition to answering questions we ask you to share during the conference. After each speaker, as you know, will spend 3 to 4 minutes on individual questions. Our speakers today include Dr. Daisy Gonzales, Executive Director of the California Student Aid Commission, Catalina Cifuentes, Chair of the California Student Aid Commission, Keiry Saravia, Commissioner of the California Student Aid Commission, and Sean Brick, Associate Vice Provost for Student Financial Support at the University of California. And thanks to all four whom I had the pleasure of talking with about this subject and learned a great deal. We begin with Dr. Gonzales. And Dr. Gonzales just, as you know, will be sending you expanded bios for each of our speakers with contact information. But just to note that she has been a tireless advocate for ensuring equitable access to financial aid for all students across California. Dr. Gonzales, thank you for leading us off this morning.
Thank you, Sandy, and good morning, everyone. I am the Executive Director of the California Student Aid Commission, and I am a proud Californian, the daughter of immigrants, and a public servant, and I'm so grateful that you are all here this morning. I'm excited to be here to talk to you about the life-changing impacts of financial aid and the importance of extending a priority deadline here in California, which is now extended to April 2nd, 2025. Today, we are here to talk about hope and support in real time. That is what a deadline extension means for our students and for California. It's important that I also share with you that financial aid for California students is about belonging in higher education. And now more than ever, it is very clear that a deadline extension is about equity in higher education. This is what our distinguished panelists are here to discuss with you today. Thank you, Sean, from the UCOP Office of the President. Thank you, Chair Cifuentes from Riverside County Office of Education. Thank you, Commissioner Saravia, also a CSU Northridge student and a CSAC commissioner. Thank you for being here. Before I dive into what a deadline extension means in terms of the mechanics and the history, I want to share a little bit about what financial aid looks like here in California. The California Student Aid Commission is a state agency, and it is responsible for administering state aid for students across all segments of public higher education. This includes students pursuing associate degrees, baccalaureate degrees, graduate education, and career technical education and vocational schools. Our mission remains the same. It is to make higher education more accessible and more affordable for California students. In short, our mission is to offer students a key to open the door to higher education. By completing a financial aid application, students qualify for scholarships, grants, which are dollars that they do not have to pay back, work-study programs, and loans. Every situation is unique for our students and for their families, but in our state, in California, we seek to help every student. Last year, for example, in the 23-24 financial aid cycle, we offered nearly 700,000 students a Cal Grant Award and over 281,000 students a middle class scholarship. Over half of the students who received the Cal Grant Award were first-generation college students. We also offered 50,000 students a student parent grant, which is the Students with Dependent grant here in California, and over 9,000 students a Chafee grant, which is for foster youth students in California, and over 9,000 veterans a Cal Grant. To live out our commitment to reach every student, our work always begins with helping students complete their financial aid application in time for that aid to make a difference, which is why we're all here today. Students qualify for financial aid by completing either the free application for federal student aid, also known as a FAFSA, or the California DREAM Act application, what we also call the CADA here in California. The CADA is, of course, California's application, and it is accessible to students regardless of their documentation status or that of their family members. So for our students, accessing financial aid in time is what brings higher education within reach. So when it comes to a priority deadline extension and why it is needed for the future of our state, and it is needed to address the unique barriers that students that they face this year, both students and their families. So every year, students who apply for financial aid represent the diversity of California. But this year was unique. This year, students faced a number of extenuating circumstances that were outside of their control, which has resulted in fewer students completing financial aid applications in our state. For CSAC and educational leaders, this is alarming because students rely on these funds to cover tuition, books, basic needs like housing, food, and transportation cost. The first extenuating circumstance faced by students here in California were the technical changes as a result of better FAFSA. And in an attempt to fix all of those issues, the FAFSA opened up 60 days later. So that was 2 months less time for students and their families to complete their financial aid applications. So we shared earlier this month that financial aid applications among high school seniors were down 25% as compared to prior years. And that is alarming to all of us, given that the number of high school students has not decreased by that same amount statewide. We also know that right now there are a lot of mixed messages about the value of higher education, what experts call the return on investment, and this has been growing since the pandemic and with increasing costs for higher education. And our third reason is the increased fear and anxiety due to ongoing news from Washington, D.C., which is informing our students and their families about their choices and their future perspective. And yes, I'm talking about things like eliminating the U.S. Department of Education to executive orders on freezing federal funding and increasing immigration enforcement efforts. All of those things impact our students and families here in California. And those students and families in California are then asking themselves whether it is safe or if it's even possible for them to apply for financial aid. But CSAC wants every California student and their family to know that we want every student to succeed. Through a deadline extension, we are providing students and families in California extra time to make informed choices and to take every opportunity that they are entitled to. More broadly here in our state, CSAC is addressing a crisis that is growing. Declines in financial aid applications are that early alert for the rest of our state. That means that if we have declining financial aid applications, our state is then looking at declining enrollment, an increase in ability to meet workforce demands, and an increase in poverty and homelessness. But I'm most worried about the impact to students. This deadline extension provides all of California, all of our students and families, 30 additional days where we need to remain student-centered. Extending this deadline extension is crucial for our statewide efforts, and we need to be able to reach every student and family to inform them of the options that they have here in California. We are continuously working with our policymakers and higher education leaders to ensure that we are doing everything that we can to provide tools and resources for Californians. Our K-12 education leaders, our higher education financial aid professionals who have all been working incredibly hard, our counselors, our college access professionals, they are all critical as a part of reinforcing to our students that they belong in higher education. We know that there are many students and families from vulnerable communities, which you all can reach through your media. For example, undocumented students, students from mixed status families, who are weighing right now whether they can apply for financial aid or whether higher education is even for them. And they also have additional questions about their future. But I want to close up and just share that we are here to tell those students, the vulnerable populations in California, that they belong in higher education, that higher education is worth it, and that they are worthy, and that it will make a difference in their lives and the lives of their families. And that is what financial aid and completing that application provides our students. It's also really important that I share with all of you that for our mixed status students and eligible non-citizens, it is important to weigh every situation and circumstance for their families. Students have the option to complete a FAFSA, which will provide them eligibility to access federal financial aid, in addition to state and institutional aid. And while we cannot speculate on how the federal administration may use the information that is collected through that application, here in California, you have choices. That's why I want to share that the California DREAM Act application remains open and a viable option for undocumented students and mixed status families. If you use the California DREAM Act application, your information is held by the state of California, and it will only be used to determine eligibility for state and institutional-based financial aid. So as I begin to close up, I just ask that you help us reach students and families. Every single action will make a difference, from helping students find the information about a deadline extension to the way that our K-12 partners and higher education partners mobilize their own communities and look at their own data. CSAC has a dashboard where you could actually look up every single district, high school, and region in the state of California to know what the impact has been to your communities. We are so grateful to the University of California Office of the President. Thank you, Sean, for being here, for that coordination to be able to extend this priority deadline. Both the FAFSA and the CADA are included as a part of the deadline extension to April 2nd, 2025. With that, I will just end by sharing, we'll share a lot of information, toolkits, and backgrounds about how this deadline extension operates, and additional resources like our Cash for College workshops, which are available to all communities online or in person as a part of helping students and families complete their application. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. That was a wonderful overview, Dr. Gonzales. And thank you to Sarah Beth Brooks for entering in the chat a link, because it's confusing. There are so many different options you're outlining. One thing I'd like to ask you is, your own personal story is a powerful message of why higher education is such a important goal for students to embrace. And there's a tendency now, perhaps reflected in this 25% drop-off, that somehow higher education is closing off as an option. Could you share a little of your personal story as a kind of example of overcoming obstacles and really feeling the need to get more examples to inspire people?
Thank you, Sandy, for the question. I think we all have unique stories and experiences as we seek to access higher education in this country, but especially if you come from an immigrant family. I am the daughter of immigrants, as I shared earlier, but I also grew up in foster care in the Los Angeles County area. And I relied on all of my teachers and counselors to be those role models and heroes for me. But I wouldn't be who I am today, a public servant, if I did not have access to financial aid. I was able to access financial aid at the age of 17, go to community colleges, eventually transferred to a four-year institution where I was able to get access to both Cal Grants and the Chafee Grant here in California. And then I have now the honor of helping California expand those resources to all students. But I wouldn't be here without the UC system. I'm a proud UC graduate. I'm a proud community college graduate. But all of the odds were against me. And if it wasn't for California's financial aid system, for the resources that CSAC provides, I know that I wouldn't be who I am. I know that I would not have been able to access higher education. And that's a very similar situation and feeling that many of our students are having right now, which is why we all have the ability to make a difference, to say, actually, you can do it. And California needs you to keep dreaming, to keep building, and yes, to apply for financial aid.
Thank you. Was there one person that in particular you credit with directing you to consider applying for financial aid? It feels like a huge hurdle when you're discouraged, and the very idea that you could qualify for financial aid seems such almost a pipe dream. What made you believe you could do it?
So many people that made a difference, and number one, told me what higher education was. But financial aid for me really is credited to my sophomore year high school teacher, Ms. Barker, who I still stay in contact with, who showed me, number one, how to apply for college, and two, that there was a FAFSA application that I needed to complete, and that there were deadlines like the ones that we are talking about today.
And the applications themselves have been simplified. If I'm not mistaken, I remember spending a great deal of time helping young people who worked for us with these applications, and they were, even for somebody who is an experienced communications person, very challenging. Who would a student be able to turn to if they indeed decided to get started? There could be counselors, there could be teachers, but if not, is there somebody at CSAC, or who would you recommend?
Yeah, I'm smiling because there's a whole community, and a lot of them are here represented in the panel, and I'm excited that they're going to get to speak next because CSAC, of course, has our Cash for College events. We also have a call center so students and families can reach out. Everything from I forgot my login and I need to reset it to how do I get you this information because I can't find that information, which means I can't complete my application. So we have Cash for College events, our call center. We also have an incredible partnership with all of our Cal Soaps across the state. There are 16 different regions that are served by our Cal Soaps. We also know that all of our high school counselors play a critical role. That's what I'm hoping Chair Cifuentes can speak about today. Our students have been mobilizing across the state as well, working with all of the associations. And then our segment leaders are four-year partners like the UC Office of the President, offering their own resources and help for students. So there is a whole community that believes in California's students.
Thank you so much for those details. We'll circle back with final questions, but now we go to our next speaker, Catalina Cifuentes, Chair of the California Student Aid Commission. Ms. Cifuentes has been instrumental in shaping policies that ensure students from all backgrounds have the resources they need to succeed. Thank you so much for joining us, Chairwoman Cifuentes.
Thank you so much for having me. Good. Thank you, Sandy. Just good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're at today. Thank you for being here. I think it's important to know a little bit of, I am chair of the Student Aid Commission, but on my day job, I am the executive director of college and career readiness in Riverside County Office of Education, and that's in Southern California. We serve over 420,000 K-12 students in Riverside County, 23 school districts. So we're larger than about 13 states in the United States. And so with that, we also have about over 30,000 high school seniors every year. So I get to be a part of the Student Aid Commission and the work the state is doing, but I also get to be boots on the ground with students and families here in Riverside County. And we are dealing with a very a high population of students that are first generation. Lumina Foundation did research on 25 metropolitan regions in the state, and Riverside County, even though we have a high number of adults living in this county, we have one of the lowest college educated adult population in the United States. So with that,
Catalina,
sure.
could you slow down just a little? I'm getting
Okay.
messages. You're going too fast.
Okay, all right, I'm giving too much information, no worries. So with that, we do have a high volume of students that are first in their family to go to college. And I think the message to send out, which is, you'll find that any part in the state, and depending on the population, is students that are first generation, they're very school dependent. And we say institution dependent, school dependent, whether that means in high school or that means in college. They need services and support. And we have so many great features have come into play, like chat features and AI. But a lot of these students and what we're experiencing is they need that human connection and they need that contact to help them understand what's happening and navigate these decisions. So much is being pushed to them, information through social media, news reports, like Dr. Gonzales said, and families really need to make that educated decision for their students and their families, and not just, take what they see online, and really take the time to understand where they're at. Should they apply? Is it safe for them to apply? Do they want to? And then obviously we always tell our families here in high school is apply, submit your application, see what happens. You have plenty of time to decide if you want to pursue post-secondary, but you only have this window to make sure you get the maximum financial aid available. So I'm really encouraging as many counselors and administrators and leaders to build more time for that human connection with families and let families make these decisions, but let them make an educated decision, not just I'm not going to do that, or I'm not going to do that application, or it's going to take too long. I think another thing to consider is this cycle for us, what we're seeing in Riverside County is they have, I know it's on my background noise, so Sandy, my beers. Okay, thank you. So this cycle we're seeing right now, during the global pandemic, we really took a hit in financial aid applications, rightfully because students were nervous about the future. They weren't sure if they were going to go to school next year. For that following year, they didn't want to maybe do virtual learning at college. But what we're feeling and seeing right now is even worse than what we saw during a global pandemic. And it's the amount of misinformation being sent, or misunderstanding being sent to students and families. At least during the pandemic, we could somewhat have a hold on what was happening, where they were at, some of their nervousness. And many of those students came back. But what's happening here is I'm worried that by the time these students and families realize they should have applied, they could have gone financial aid, they could have gotten free tuition and fees covered at one of the institutions. It's too late. They may have full-time jobs by then. They may have children. They may have spouses or love or partners. And coming back to schools, we know is so difficult for working adults. And so we're here to just really send the message of demystifying those misconceptions for students and of really doing an all call for our K-12 leaders to step up and to spend more of that human connection time to walk families through this process, whether they're a mixed family status, their family completely, everyone's a U.S. citizen, regardless. We need to take the time to spend with families. And if our families listening, I would say call your school counselor, ask for your principal, ask for a teacher, reach out to somebody in your school district and say, hey, I think I need someone to sit down with me and walk me through my options. Even if your child's not certain about their future, if they want to go to college.
What do you think? You visit school sites regularly. You've mentioned sometimes concern that there isn't enough sort of outreach coming from school administrators and teachers to the parents if a kid is absent and or showing no interest in pursuing higher education. What is it that you think schools need to be doing to strengthen that connection to families that you see as so important?
Yeah. Schools need to build systems within the school day. We can't rely, what usually happens is there's a financial aid night tomorrow night, or there's a Saturday workshop, which is great and phenomenal. And thank you to our educators that do those events in the evenings and on the weekends. But the reality is many of our students and families can't get to those opportunities. So schools need to build opportunities for awareness, for applications, for submissions during the school day with students and families whenever possible. And they can connect it to so many things like financial literacy for their students and their curriculum. But more of that needs to happen during a day and not by chance. I, like Dr. Gonzales, daughter of immigrants. I was fortunate to be born in the United States, but my parents were undocumented until I was in high school. And so when I look at what's happening now, they didn't know. And I'm here by chance. My mom cleaned the house of the woman that was the assistant superintendent of a school district I went to. And she said, can you help my daughter get to college? And what we have to do is stop accepting those stories and start pushing for systems within the school day for the students so they can get opportunities and access and they're not here by chance.
What are you seeing in the Riverside, San Bernardino area where applications are very, as I think you told me in a previous call, very concerning, very low? Is it the sense that college won't help address the immediate economic needs that they or their families are experiencing? Or is it just a general sense of lack of direction and purpose? What do we do to mobilize students to really focus on higher education, particularly in areas with low application rates like the Inland Empire?
I would say both of those and more, Sandy, have been some of the issues we're seeing with our students. But there's a combination of students. We have 16 and 17-year-old students that are first generation, first in their family that would do any type of higher education, sometimes even graduate high school. They're making these decisions in isolation without their families. And what I mean is, if you have a student that's a first generation student, first generation college, first generation graduate, maybe a low income, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and he tells you or she tells you or they tell you, I'm not going to do the FAFSA, and you accept that, that's not okay. Have you called the parent? Have you communicated with the family? What I found is missing is we're not involving parents, families, guardians in the process of the future planning for our students. And I think we need to do more of that. I think part two is there is a lot of information about, is college worth it? Is college possible? And we see there's so much out there in research that year for year, an adult will likely earn higher earnings depending on the education they have after high school. The reality is the jobs that are available to our students right now requires, high paying jobs, decent paying jobs, livable wage, health insurance. They're going to require more than just a high school diploma. And I think that's where people aren't making connections. Yes, you have these onesies and twosies individuals that do well without a college degree. But what we're pushing is it's not just a four-year college degree. We're pushing certificates, career technical education, certifications in cybersecurity. You don't necessarily have to get a four-year degree. We want to see students pursue some post-secondary after high school. And so I think there's a lot of misinformation of what students can earn. And then I'd say another piece we're missing is in public schools is we're not connecting our students to careers first and conversations around careers. We used to be able to say, just go to college. I promise you it'll work out, or you'll figure out what you're going to major in. And I think more of us have to spend the time to connect students to different jobs and majors and career opportunities earlier in high school so they can see the why they want to go to post-secondary or this trade school or UC Riverside.
Thank you. Probably the most challenging, or let's say discouraging messaging we're hearing, which is that somehow issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion have unfairly tilted the system to the detriment of students who are not students of color. And what can we do to, there's a fear that now that somehow if you promote or flag your programs encouraging diversity and equity in applications, you're going to put federal funds at risk. Do you encounter that, or how do we address that issue? This is a question I have from the chat.
Okay. I think it'd be awesome. I know for Dr. Gonzales and Sean Brick to share a little bit, I think, on the institutional side, what they're doing. I know it's really what I've seen on the K-12 side, it's really being addressed, especially in California. We're local control driven. So it's every school district, school board gets to make decisions for their district and their community. So I think it's really happening case by case. But I will say, what I've seen in the last 10 years, and especially with the California Student Aid Commission team, and our legislators, we're a California for all. So we've always been pushing, and we're pushing for all student populations to rise and do well. And it's never just, we have that mindset, California for all, California for all. So a lot of the time we spend time looking at communities based on demographics, like rural communities in California. How are we getting to them? We look at data, not just demographics, but we look at data. What part of our state needs additional support? So I would say I can speak in terms of what I've seen with our team here, CSAC, and in general, is we're about supporting all students. But I think Dr. Gonzales and Sean could probably speak to some institutional decisions being made.
Great. We'll come back to that after our last two speakers. Thank you so much for your insights. We go next to Keiry Saravia, who is Commissioner of the California Student Aid Commission, and you are at Cal State Northridge. You are a sophomore, or are you a junior?
I'm a junior.
You're a junior. Welcome, and you've taken on a leadership role with the commissioner representing students. So we're eager to get the student perspective on financial aid and what you think would help reverse this decline and encourage more students to take the options available to pursue higher education.
Of course. Hello everyone. My name is Keiry Saravia. I am currently a junior studying at California State University, Northridge. I am studying to become an English teacher in hopes that I will hopefully be able to go to law school after this and become an immigration and criminal lawyer. Um, I am also a first generation student that was born and raised in Los Angeles, to two immigrant parents who immigrated from El Salvador to Los Angeles and have stayed in the exact same area for since the day I was born. Um, and I'm also a Cal Grant recipient. Without financial aid like the Cal Grant, I don't know if I would even be in the position I am right now. Financial aid is the biggest reason as to why I'm able to attend the CSU I'm currently at. And with two younger sisters in mind to think about, it was a really tough decision to figure out whether college was even an option for me and whether I was ever going to be able to make it and get a BA when I had two younger sisters to think about. But because of the financial aid I was able to receive, I'm able to focus on my studies, but I'm also able to put aside a lot of it to be able to go to law school and pay for some of it, as well as help with a few minor basic need expenses. I'm a commuter student, so I drive from Hollywood all the way to Northridge, which is not an easy commute. But when you add up all of the gas that goes into it alongside all of the time that I spend in Northridge, it becomes a lot. So apart from the Cal Grant, I also have two part-time jobs where I represent the student body, and I work at a hardware store. And it's also that I can just survive and help out my family every now and then. Um, I think that the biggest issue regarding students not wanting to apply for financial aid is the fact that they don't know. Right now, we are getting a lot of misinformation, even for students here at CSUN, where a lot of us have already submitted our our FAFSA like maybe once or twice. We're still getting a lot of misinformation about whether we'll be eligible again, whether it's even feasible, whether our information is going to be safe, because um CSUN specifically is a very predominantly Hispanic community. And so a lot of students who come from immigrant backgrounds and are undocumented are scared about um, applying for FAFSA. And I think that has deterred a lot of students from reapplying, but also has deterred a lot of high schoolers from even considering applying. And I think that that's one of the biggest issues um, that needs to be discussed when it comes to trying to get students to even consider applying. But I want to remind all of my peers and all of my prospective students that CSAC specifically is committed to ensuring that you can get this financial aid. That CSAC is here to ensure that your information is safe and that you're able to qualify for these types of this type of help. And it's very easy for students to just assume that they're not eligible, but if it wasn't for a lot of my friends just applying, even though they've been rejected a few times because of certain circumstances, with their family's income, if it wasn't for them continuing to apply, they wouldn't have been able to get grants such as the middle class scholarship. It just takes students continuing to push to try to find that help that leads to a lot of students being able to get that help. And I think more students need to know that they don't have to stop after one application. They can keep applying until at some point they might end up being eligible. So the main reason that I'm a commissioner right now is because I really, really, really wanted to give back to the organization that helped me and is going to help my sisters and is going to help future students just like me to be able to go to higher education. Because for a lot of students, higher education was never, ever, ever in their path. And if it wasn't for CSAC pushing and pushing for students to get those opportunities, maybe a lot of students wouldn't be in the positions that they are now, me included. So as commissioner, I really just want to advocate for students like myself, share my personal stories, and help inspire other students to try to find these opportunities and try to understand what the agency, what CSAC, and what the state of California is willing to do in order to ensure that the next generation is going to be able to give back to society. And that starts with getting them to higher education, because there's always going to be a resource out there. And if a student is committed to pursuing their BA, their master's, or their PhD, they will be able to find it and they will be able to get it. And CSAC is one of those resources that has continuously championed for students through and through. So
would you say those are very inspiring words? Would you say, this is a question from our chat, that you could consider going on to graduate school, going on to law school without having the benefit of financial aid?
honestly, no, because at the end of the day, as an older sister, my commitment is to making sure that they get to college. My commitment is to make sure that my parents are able to live comfortably. And if I would have to go to law school with no help, it would make it a lot more difficult for me to be able to help my younger sisters. And it's a very big decision that I actually considered my senior year, when I didn't know that FAFSA was something that I could take advantage of, and I didn't know that the Cal Grant was something I could take advantage of. I was considering not going to college, period, or going to community college, which is something my parents really didn't want me to do. Um, but it was a decision that I thought needed to be made if it meant that my sister's futures were going to stay intact and were going to be bigger than what I wanted. So I probably wouldn't have considered even going to law school if I wasn't able to get this financial aid, because I would have been more committed to getting a job and ensuring that my sisters are able to go to college and are able to pay for it because I'm able to help them pay for it.
Thank you. Please stay for our final round of questions, but really very helpful insights. Our next speaker is Sean Brick, Associate Vice Provost for Student Financial Support at the University of California, an institution dedicated to providing equitable access to higher education for all Californians. We are grateful for their partnership with the California Student Aid Commission, and welcome having Sean Brick tell us more.
Thank you, Sandy, and thank you to the California Student Aid Commission and Ethnic Media Services for this opportunity. As Sandy said, I'm Sean Brick. I'm Associate Vice Provost for Student Financial Support at the UC Office of the President. So I'm going to talk about three things. First, I'll start with the nuts and bolts about the deadline extension and how that plays out at UC. Second, I'll just want to reaffirm UC's values on inclusion and belonging and our commitment to affordable higher education. And then finally, I want to encourage students and families to explore all the great educational opportunities in the state of California. So I am here representing UC, but I want to make sure that the message is that there are lots of opportunities in the state of California, and our state supports students. So first, the nuts and bolts. So the University of California has moved our own financial aid priority filing deadline to match the state of California. So our websites have been updated and our social media feeds are also announcing the extension deadline. And that means that students who meet the state's deadline will also be considered for the full range of University of California financial aid. We do encourage students not to wait till the last minute, however, if they can. We'll be admitting students, new students will be admitted in the month of March. And so the sooner you file your financial aid application, the sooner we can tell you all of the kinds of financial aid you're eligible for. Second, as I said, I want to reaffirm that the University of California is committed to its values of inclusiveness and belonging. As UC President Drake has said, we're committed to ensuring that our campuses benefit from the talents and aspirations of all as we create a vibrant workforce for future generations. And we also are very committed to affordability for Californians. So, students and families hear a lot in the media these days about student debt and about rising tuition. But the reality is that nearly 2/3 of California undergraduates last year graduated debt-free from the university. And each new cohort of students that we admit, we tell them when they're admitted what their tuition is, and that tuition stays the same for up to 6 years while they're enrolled with us. These outcomes are only possible because, as I've been saying, and as the other speakers have said, the state of California has the biggest financial aid programs in the country. Dr. Gonzales talked about a number of them: the Cal Grant program, the Middle Class Scholarship Program, the Chafee Grant program, and others. So what speakers, or what I would like to add, is that the University of California also has its own financial aid program. This year, we are providing over $1 billion to our 9 undergraduate campuses to make grants and scholarships for low and middle income students across our system. It's also important to point out that financial aid is about more than covering tuition. And I think Dr. Gonzales touched on this as well. There's financial aid available for students to help cover other costs that they face while they're enrolled in school. So that includes food, housing, transportation, books and supplies. And as Dr. Gonzales mentioned, the value of a degree is real. And that brings me to my final point, that students and families have a lot of great college choices in California. There's 116 community colleges, if I'm not correct, or somebody can correct me if I got the number wrong. We've got over 20 California State University campuses and 9 undergraduate UC campuses, as well as our many non-for-profit private colleges. So we really just want to encourage students and families to use this extra time from this deadline extension to explore all these options, to learn about the return on investment to college, and to file that FAFSA or the California Dream Act application. And I'll kick it back to you, Sandy.
Well, thank you. I'd like to ask each speaker, starting with Dr. Gonzales, just your interaction with the current generation of students in high school, the biggest target for this briefing, to encourage them to consider higher education. What do you think the general outlook is? And are you obviously concerned that anxiety and disinformation, and as Keiry said, a lack of kind of information very specifically targeting higher education, what do you see as the mood on high school campuses that all of us in the media are concerned about, and that in some ways we need to pay more attention to covering where students are and how they're thinking about their futures, so that we can create an environment that encourages them and their families to really see the opportunities? There is, in a way, a pessimism that is growing, and our challenge is to figure out how to address that in a way that's realistic and fact-based. And nothing is more powerful than the individual stories that our speakers have shared about their own experience. But how would you describe the mood among students looking at their futures? We as journalists need to hear your thoughts so we can tailor our stories to be more mindful of anxieties for seniors, for even juniors at the high school level. Dr. Gonzales.
Thank you for the question, Sandy. It's our collective challenge and an opportunity. And at CSAC, we also have a student advisory council. And I can tell you that I gain optimism from them, from the students that convene to organize. So I mentioned earlier that the student associations are getting organized. And one of their main focus areas is actually reaching back to their local high schools and going back to their communities. There will be a student town hall, so all the student associations across all of our higher education segments on March 14th. And it was a result of showing them all of the data. So when you ask me about what's happening on the ground, there's both the reality that information is power. La información es poder. And on the other side, that extreme optimism and hope that comes from that next generation. I think the one thing that we need to remember as adults is our students, our children, no matter whether it's high school. Right now, we're talking about our seniors, reaching them in time. We have the next 30 days to do this. But even before then, how do we create a culture of belonging and of higher education as that mission? As Commissioner Saravia shared, right? This is the vision that she has for her family now. And it's what she's willing to do no matter what she achieves in this world. She wants her sisters to achieve even more. I see that on the ground all the time when I speak to families and I clarify what exists out there, the two different types of applications, the fact that every single family and situation is so unique. So for example, the state of California has state financial aid just for undocumented students, for middle-class students. That's California's solution. For foster youth, for students with dependents, this is state aid. Around it, we have federal aid, the incredible generous support of institutional aid like the ones that Sean mentioned here today. And then you have the ecosystem of work study, both state and federal, loans and scholarships that also exist outside of our institutions of higher education. But we have to do that in time, reaching students in time. And for me, really important lately, it's been in the right language for many, many families. And I see that many of you are representing different news sources, translating. Thank you for being here. You know, I can only speak one other language, and that's Spanish. So when I tell you about the future and how our students are doing on the ground, I can confidently tell you that information is power. La información es poder. Y sé que hay muchos californianos que están preocupados por lo que está pasando en Washington, D.C. y las decisiones judiciales que han generado preocupación. Entiendo que todo esto puede afectar su perspectiva, las decisiones que hacen personalmente por sus familias, pero no están solos. La educación universitaria sigue siendo una opción para ustedes en California y es muy importante que les comparta que California necesita que sigan soñando, que sigan construyendo y que soliciten la ayuda financiera que les corresponde. Esto es un acto para su futuro, el futuro de todos las generaciones que vienen y más importante, las generaciones que van a necesitar esperanza. I won't translate it because I feel like I said a lot of that in English already, that this is really more around those personalized decisions and Californians that need to know that in California you have options, you have a limited time to submit an application, but we need you to keep dreaming and we need you to give the next generation hope.
Right. Commissioner Cifuentes, you're worried that we won't, if we lose students now, it'll be harder than ever to get them back. What is the mood you're finding and that you're seeing this briefing as an effort to address that mood and change it into more optimistic and inspired optimism about their future?
I think this is a great question, and I like the rest of our panel members. Thank you for being here and for sharing the message. And I think there's two messages for the families, the guardians, the parents, and that is it's what the plan is after high school. Having that conversation with your student, and if you're not sure, if they tell you, I want to get a job, have they showed you a resume? Have they submitted for an application? If they said they want to go to community college, have you sat with a counselor or someone from the school to go over those steps? So I think any information the community here today can get out directly to parents and families and guardians, whether they're college, first generation, or they have college degrees, is to, demand information, demand support, ask to get help and to receive the support you deserve for your students. I think when it comes to students, the hope, Dr. Gonzales said it beautifully. We have to continue to give our students options. Our job here in public schools and K-12 education is to give students multiple doors, multiple options to walk through. And I think the message for our students is that's it. It's time to not just have one plan or one idea, but why not pursue multiple opportunities, multiple options for yourself. And if you decide to, go straight into the workforce after you do a financial aid application and you apply to UC, University of California, that's okay, but you made that educated decision. It wasn't a decision out of not knowing the possibilities.
Thank you. Keiry, Saravia, your read of the mood on high school campuses among your younger sisters about the future, how you address that anxiety and turn it to real positive belief they can move forward.
I think that the biggest thing that high schoolers are currently facing is kind of like how Cifuentes had mentioned it and Dr. Gonzales had mentioned it, is even knowing what to major in and what they should study. And one of my younger sisters, I like referencing them because like they're younger a lot. One of them is planning on studying music. And to a lot of families, it's like, okay, well, what are you actually going to do with that degree? But with her, I'm just saying like, okay, look at all the options that you have with a music degree. You can go on and study music. I'll support you 100%. I'll be behind you and I'll help you find the best music program in the state of California or in the country as a whole if you need me to help you. But I want you to 100% know all of the career paths that you can take when you choose that degree. I think it's always having students know that their options, regardless of the degree, are many. There are many. Like students can go on and study ethnic studies and you'll never know where they'll end up. I think that just making that connection is very important though.
That's great. And finally, Sean Brick, your read of the mood among this generation of students and their sense of their options for the future.
I would echo what you've heard from the other speakers in the terms of there's some skepticism about the value of higher education, and we really see sort of that's a challenge for higher education as a whole, and I think something we really need to embrace as going forward. That we not just from a return on investment standpoint, but what is the value of higher education in terms of creating an educated citizenry? What are the values in terms of understanding your options, both educationally and employment wise? And in the spirit of that, I'll drop a link into the chat for some of the data that we have available at the University of California in terms of educational outcomes. And you can, I think there's one out there, Keiry, where you can see outcomes for music majors. So that might be something you can share with your sister.
Well, this has been a wake-up call for all of us. The 25% decline in applications can be read as a kind of shutting or turning one's back on such an incredible resource for pursuing higher education. The absolute commitment of California to make higher education accessible for all Californians at a time when there's so much confusion and concern and anxiety, and the fact that California is extending the deadline. It's now April 2nd. Could each of you just give us your headline for today's briefing? What do you want the parents and students who we reach through our media on today's call to take away? You have to be very, very short, just a single sentence. Dr. Gonzales, what's your headline?
Forgot you were going to ask this question. You asked it at the last briefing, but I would say don't leave money on the table.
That's a wonderful headline. Catalina, Cifuentes, your headline.
Graduate with multiple options after high school.
Terrific. Keiry, Saravia, your headline, as if your message to your younger sisters.
Someone out there wants you to go to college.
Great. Great. And Sean Brick, your headline for today's briefing.
You and your family can afford college. And we'll make sure that we'll make sure that's a reality.
These are 4 wonderful headlines. We will list them in our follow-up. We're so glad you joined us and helped us think through also what our role as journalists reaching specific communities that often don't have access to information that is so pertinent and relevant to the students looking to the future. Thank you so much and have a great afternoon. Thank you for joining us.